Welcome back to the series of Diagnosing the Characters.
2,000 years later.
I know it took a while, but I'm here now, so...
Wow. Crazy. You're crazy, girl.
I've actually got 1 or 2 requests for me to do this character, so I'm gonna roll with it. If you're new here, then you probably haven't seen my last update to the series, which was basically just me diagnosing Light Yagami from Death Note. So be sure to check that out. Also, if you have any other suggestions for other characters you'd like me to try my hand at, don't be shy and leave a comment down below. Like last time, I'm just going to do a quick disclaimer. I am not a psychologist, I'm not studying to become one, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. I just have an unnatural fascination with psychology and not as much free time on my hands anymore, but we make it work. Azula is a very misunderstood character. I've seen and had many arguments about her, ranging from being a psychopath to just being entitled, then to straight up being batshit crazy. And to start this argument off, Azula is not a psychopath, and the word crazy is way too harsh for me. I like to say just a little mentally unstable. I feel like antisocial personality disorder is one of the most misunderstood mental disorders out there. And since it is so widely misunderstood, you always hear the term psychopath being thrown around a lot because no one seems to know what it actually means. Or more accurately, they just seem to have a misguided understanding of what it means. There's almost like a common consensus to label anyone that demonstrates even the slightest case of mental instability a psychopath, or for being cute, a psycho. It's not cute, by the way. As I've said before, antisocial personality disorder is a pattern whereby a person not only lacks empathy, but they also believe they are exempt from general social and societal rules, which is tied to a variety of different reasons. Obviously, that doesn't apply to anyone that doesn't follow the rules. There is certain criteria and symptoms one has to meet to be diagnosed, but that's more or less the basis of the disorder. I go into antisocial personality disorder a lot more in my Why Light Yagami is a Psychopath and Not a Sociopath video. If there's anything that I don't discuss in the video, I have a lot of discussions in the comment section. So be sure to check that out if you want to be more informed on the disorder. Anyways, Azula does, for one, follow the rules. It may not be the ones that conform to behavioural societal norms, but she does obey Fire Lord Ozai's orders. She does what she's told, it just depends on who's asking. I feel like Azula's character narrative is severely off the mark. Yes, she is one of the main antagonists throughout season 2 to 3, but she's also the victim. Just like Zuko, she's a victim of their father, Fire Lord Ozai. Zuko is blatantly abused throughout the show. The scar on his eye is a testimony to that. He's publicly abused and humiliated, has his rights and identity stripped away from him, has his intelligence insulted by having him sent off on a task that's equivalent to a dog chasing its tail. He's been through it, and throughout the series we see how that affects him, both physically and mentally. On the other hand, Azula's abuse is primarily psychological, so it's more discreet. It's not as obvious and a slower process with a long-term effect on her. So the question now is, how was she psychologically abused? From her childhood, she and her brother had a dynamic that had her in the position of the golden child and Zuko in the position of the black sheep or the scapegoat. These are roles assigned to the children of a narcissistic parent or parents in a narcissistic household. In this household, there's only one narcissistic parent, and it's not Ursa, it's Ozai. Fire Lord Ozai is definitely a narcissist, and I don't just mean that he shows narcissistic tendencies or traits. He actually is a narcissist, and he's not just any type of narcissist. He's a malignant narcissist, which by far is the most problematic and harmful of all the types. The malignant narcissist exudes all the same traits as your textbook grandiose narcissist, such as low empathy, arrogance, grandiosity, egocentricity, etc. But in addition to that, they display antisocial behavior and can even come across as sadistic. But the trait I want to place emphasis on ties into how and why the family dynamic occurs. which is how highly manipulative they are. This is why narcissists assign roles to their children, as it 1. Creates drama and chaos among the children, and narcissists enjoy doing this because they love emotionally manipulating people, and 2. It also gives them a sense of control because they're controlling people's emotions, which in turn acts as a form of narcissistic supply. So narcissistic supply relates to the narcissistic attention-seeking behavior, which can be either positive or negative. Narcissistic supply acts as the narcissist's psychological food that basically helps feed their sense of entitlement and self-centeredness. It can be achieved through a variety of different means, such as receiving endless admiration, special treatment, validation, etc. I know I'm using a lot of clinical and technical terms that I'm not fully fleshing out, and I'm doing that intentionally because in this video I'm not necessarily focusing on narcissists and narcissism as a whole, but more so the effects caused by narcissists and what that may look like for the people around them. The golden child is what it sounds like. They are the favorite child. The narcissist assigns them this role because they bring some kind of glory or praise to the narcissist and family. This is because narcissists see their children as extensions of themselves instead of as their own individuals. So if the child is getting praised, it's almost as if they are receiving that praise and attention and a way that they can get narcissistic supply. The golden child is usually really good at something that the narcissist values, or this can even be because the narcissist shares traits with the golden child or sees themselves in them. Since Fire Lord Ozai is a malignant narcissist, his values aren't going to completely align with the traditional narcissistic parent, as their values are more centered around power, control, and dominance. As a child, Azula has always been very good at firebending and is also academically intelligent, which is a sign of power. In the Search comic, Azula burns her teacher's pants for telling her what to do, a sign of dominance in which he commends her for. Throughout her childhood and into her teenage years, Azula also spent a lot of time manipulating her friends and brother, which is also a clear sign of control. On the other hand, the black sheep is the direct opposite of the golden child. I've talked about the black sheep before, but I'll quickly reiterate what it means. The black sheep is the oddball of the family. They are ostracized, blamed for faults and mistakes that may not even be theirs, and unfortunately, they are misunderstood souls. The black sheep usually tends to be more sensitive. They have different values and curiosities to their family. As we've seen earlier in Zuko's childhood, he was a lot more sensitive than Azula, and this was shown during many different occasions, such as when he empathized with Iroh when his son died. He also demonstrated how different his values are when he disagreed with the general's battle tactics because he believed that comrades should not be used as pawns. So, in short, he prioritized honor over victory. These qualities normally enable the narcissistic parent to further isolate them from the rest of the family by driving home the narrative of how they are the cause of the family's problems. This is how the roles are assigned. But now, how does that affect them? The lack of love, attention, and protection alongside the isolation can severely damage the black sheep's mental state of mind, leaving them with a list of problems such as depression, anxiety issues, self-hatred, self-doubt and self-esteem issues, abandonment issues, maladaptive coping, etc. It's safe to say that Zuko ticks most of these boxes. However, I feel like the golden child is in the worse position than its counterpart, as since the black sheep isn't so closely enmeshed with the narcissistic parent, in most cases when they grow up, they manage to break away from the family system and actually get help, as we see happen later on, opposed to the golden child, who usually doesn't get help because 1, they are so closely meshed with the narcissistic parent, and 2, they don't even realize that they're also being abused. Instead, they're more likely to stick closely to the narcissistic parent because most times they are aware of how badly the black sheep is treated and they don't want to share the same fate as them. This closely resembles Azula's relationship with Ozai. Azula is also aware that Zuko is treated differently to her, which is very apparent in this scene.
I thought we were going to do this together.
My decision is final.
You can't treat me like this. You can't treat me like Zuko.
Azula, silence yourself.
The golden child is exposed to overvaluation by the narcissistic parent, which places them at risk of two possible effects. They can follow the parent's footsteps and regurgitate the narcissism cycle when they grow up, or it can also transform them into a person who believes that they are only valued by what they can do, for example, achievements, instead of who they actually are. Personally, I believe Azula falls into the second category. Most of the time, when the golden child goes into adulthood, they still carry this belief, this performative type of love along. This opens the door for them to develop conditional or transactional relationships and friendships. We get some insight into this when Azula and her friends get invited to a party. Azula seems to have a crush on Chan, in which she spends most of the party trying to get. When she finally does get him and they share a kiss, she ruins the moment by saying this.
You're pretty.
Together, you and I will be the strongest couple in the entire world. We will dominate the Earth!
Although it's played off as a comedic gag, it gives us greater insight into her thought processing. She was mostly attracted to his popularity as a result of his good looks and overall status in society, because it would reflect well on her. What's so tragic about the golden child is how the reality is destined to collapse in on itself. This is because the golden child's relationship with the narcissistic parent is solely built on conditional love. Once the child stops providing narcissistic supply to the parent, or if the narcissistic parent becomes jealous of the child and changes the role to scapegoat, or even when the narcissistic parent simply gets bored of the child, they will be tossed aside. This moment unfolds in the last few episodes of the series. We see the process of Ozai tossing her aside and what effect this has on Azula. This is first seen in the last arc, Sozan's Comet. Azula rushes to Ozai under the impression that they are supposed to journey to Ba Sing Se together to burn it down. At the beginning of this exchange, Ozai's back is already facing toward her, indicating that he's no longer willing to acknowledge her. He then informs her that he'll be going to Ba Sing Se alone, and she should remain in the Fire Nation. It is apparent that this basically translates as, "You are no longer of use to me." He then proceeds to give her the title of Fire Lord, but given that he promotes himself to Phoenix King, the title Fire Lord, this makes it seem like this was a thoughtless gift equivalent to throwing a dog a bone to appease them. Ozai has discarded her, and Azula subconsciously knows this, and it confuses her because to her knowledge, she hasn't done anything wrong, so her father's abrupt change in behaviour towards her starts having an effect on her mind and sanity. This leads her to have a spiral of negative emotions, such as self-loathing. For example, her referring to herself as a monster.
Don't pretend to act proud. I know what you really think of me. You think I'm a monster.
In order for her to try and pinpoint what she may have done to deserve this. In addition to that, even the slightest possibility that her father doesn't want or need her anymore naturally instigates feelings of isolation and loneliness, because bear in mind, she has no one else in her family left besides her father. They've all abandoned her. Her mother, Iroh, Zuko. Therefore, she latches on to the fact that Ozai promoted her to Fire Lord as a show of his love for her, air quotations, which makes her become paranoid and overly hostile to anyone that threatens her position, which is all that's left of her relationship with her father. She's in fight mode now. Everything is a threat. This would explain why she banished one of her servants for giving her cherries with pits in them, because although it is a little dramatic, it may harm her, then subsequently affect her performance as Fire Lord and hence her relationship with her father. Are we seeing the pattern now? The saying corner a dog and that is when he's the most dangerous isn't indicative of animal behavior. Instead, it describes human nature. When we are trapped or cornered, that is when we're most vulnerable. And it's our default instinct to try and protect ourselves by lashing out at anything and anyone that is a threat, without a modicum of rationality. This is what is happening here. Azula is trying to protect herself, protect her reality by holding on to the fact that Ozai still loves her. That's always been the root of why. Azula just wants to be loved like any other child. I believe that's what's driving her actions in the final act of the series, and arguably from the beginning too. In the scene where Azula cuts her hair and hallucinates seeing her mother, she imagines her saying, "I love you."
No, I love you, Azula. I do.
This is all she wants. I'll touch on why she was hallucinating in a bit. The final fight she has with Katara and Zuko is her last attempt to prove herself to her father, but to also hold on to the ideology that she still has value to her father, because in Azula's mind, value equals love. However, she subsequently loses and her reality ultimately collapses. She's hit with the realization that she failed, and in her eyes, this equates to being useless, worthless, and unworthy of her father's love, hence loved by no one one at all. I know the final act of her character arc comes across as schizophrenic, but she isn't suffering from schizophrenia. I researched it thoroughly, and although it is possible to develop schizophrenia later on in life, which is around the age bracket she's in, I can say with about 85% positivity that she isn't. I feel we shouldn't underestimate the gravity of a narcissistic parent's emotional abuse on a child, especially during their formative years, which also just happened to take place during a war in which she played a part in as a child soldier. Emotional abuse can cause a variety of different conditions, such as a subcategory of PTSD known as complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD. Unlike the more common type of PTSD that is a result of short-term traumatic or a one-time traumatic experience such as sexual assault or a terrorist attack, CPTSD is a result of long-term exposure to emotional trauma without the ability to remove yourself from the situation. For example, prisoners of war and domestic abuse, etc. It is also worth noting that it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be the one that experiences the abuse. This can be a result of second-handedly experiencing it as well. Now, this brings us to the question of who is the most susceptible to develop CPTSD. So, the victim already lives with mental illness, they have substance abuse tendencies, they don't have an effective support system, and they have a history of trauma, particularly during childhood. Azula lacks an effective support system. She only has her father, who is the perpetrator of the abuse, and her friends Tylee and May, who are scared of her, so can't properly provide her with practical or emotional support. She has also been unconsciously emotionally traumatized throughout her childhood. The symptoms of CPTSD involve nervousness, eating disorders, impulsive behavior, reliving past traumas, having nightmares or flashbacks, feelings of negativity, emotional issues, insomnia, being jumpy or startled easily, uncontrollable angry outbursts, often feeling extreme anger or rage, substance abuse, experiencing excessively negative thoughts, and hallucinations. Although Azula doesn't exhibit all these behavioural patterns, she does tick the box for some, such as the hallucinations, feelings of extreme anger or rage, impulsive behaviour, and emotional issues. I've already touched on all these symptoms and how they correlate with her actions earlier, so I don't think I need to reiterate them or repeat myself. So yeah, anyways, that's it for this video. I hope that I've somewhat cleared up some of your questions on Azula. Azula was so hard to narrow down, even after months of analysing her. She was a tricky one. So if you guys have any other possible diagnoses or takes on her character, please be sure to leave a comment down below and we can get a little healthy discussion going on down there. I think we're past the point that I need to explain myself for why I've been gone for I think a year now. So we're just gonna skip the bit that I say I'm gonna cop on and be more consistent with my videos, and then I don't come back for like another year. So yeah, so I'll see you lot in my next video, and with that, I'm out.